Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Welcome back to the Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. Today's segment is about something we don't celebrate enough. What happens after the biggest chapter of your life closes? Now, we often glorify peak performance, championships, and success. But research shows that up to 78% of former professional athletes report significant struggles with mental health, identity loss, or emotional regulation within just a few years of retirement. Now, that tells us this isn't about weakness. It's about what happens when structure, routine, and identity suddenly disappear. And that's where hydration, real hydration, becomes more than physical. It becomes mental, emotional, and purpose-driven. Joining me today is Rashard Davis. He's an 8-year NFL veteran, a Super Bowl champion with the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles, and someone who understands elite performance from the inside out. But what makes Rashard's story powerful is what came after the league. Today, he's an elite pro skills trainer, developing athletes from youth to the pros, a creative entrepreneur connecting brands and athletes through storytelling, and the founder of HOURS, that's 1,000 hours, Connected, a philosophy rooted in discipline, mastery, and intentional connection. Rashard, welcome to the show, superstar.
Thank you. I appreciate you for having me.
Okay, I'm so excited to chat with you about life after the NFL. So let's go back to basics here. Neurologically, the brain thrives on structure and predictability, right? So when that disappears, especially after years of high performance conditioning, the nervous system often goes into survival mode. This is why post-career transitions can feel destabilizing even for the strongest athletes. So when your NFL career ended, what was the biggest mental or, say, emotional shift you had to make to move forward and stay grounded?
I think for me, it was just about that structure piece, keeping myself disciplined, keeping myself on a schedule. You find yourself with all this free time and this free space. You have resources, to maneuver or do what you would like. So you just have to keep yourself disciplined, like I said. And I think that was a big piece of it. I think for me, I had a couple of juggles throughout my career, so it wasn't something that was fairly new to me. But all in all, when I still didn't have that football piece to fall back on or go into, I had to find something to, occupy that space. So like I said, it was just getting myself on schedule and on track and just figuring out where I need to go and how I need to get there.
Yeah, well, what you're describing, you wanting to pave out that journey, makes so much sense because when you think of identity, it doesn't disappear overnight. It just has to be reintegrated, not really replaced, right? So you're still that NFL player. You just have to now reshift directions. So I love where your journey has taken you, which leads me up to a HOURS. And I say that because we're on the radio and people can't actually see the logo, but it's fabulous. Now, there's strong research around deliberate practice showing that repetition doesn't just build skills, it strengthens emotional regulation, confidence, and resilience. And your HOURS Connected philosophy feels like a reframing of mastery away from pressure and towards presence. So what does all of this mean to you, your foundation and your organization, and how does that philosophy extend beyond football into real life?
Yeah, so it's multiple different pieces of it. 1,000 hours is the household name, that's the big house. And then you have 1,000 hours connected and other things that falls underneath that. But for me, 1,000 hours just represents the journey. So basically, when you're on your road or your path to whatever destination you're trying to get to, whatever goal you're trying to reach, it's a lot of time that goes into it that people don't understand or people don't see. So the A stands for anonymous. And the zeros, they just, represent the time that you put in that, like I said, people don't see. You don't know how much time it's going to take for you to reach your destination. You don't know how much time you're going to have to put in, behind closed doors, behind the cameras to actually perfect your craft, So for me, that was something that I always found myself in. Like with football, it was a journey. It was a roller coaster, up and down, but I was still putting in time that people didn't see. They saw the games on TV. They saw the championship trophies being held up. But they didn't see, when I was in the gym at 5 a.m. grinding, before I got picked up by the Eagles, I had a waiting job. So I had to go wait tables. And then, I got off of that job and I would still go back to the gym or hit the field and work out. But then when the call came, I was ready, got to where I had to get to, just because I stay optimistic and I stay ready for it.
1,000 hours really is such a beautiful mindset that you have created for yourself and for others. And going back to your philosophy, when preparation meets opportunity, you have success. And getting picked up by the Philadelphia Eagles was no coincidence. It was meant. And that's an important distinction, because connection is what keeps both performance and mental health sustainable. And you were smart enough to do that even when the stakes were pretty low and you maintained your training. And that is really what speaks volumes. So let's talk about, as an elite skills trainer, how do you intentionally develop not just better athletes, but healthier humans?
So, for me, like when I got to the NFL, coming out of a small city like Charlottesville, Virginia, I didn't have other guys that was pursuing the same dream that I was. It wasn't too many trainers or, people in the city that I could connect with to kind of help me along my way. So, that's something that I had to figure out on my own and navigate on my own, train myself, figured out what I needed, to continue to compete, continue to stay healthy and, recover and everything else. So, now when I'm able to go in and talk to these guys or, really develop these guys, I'm telling them like, okay, put this much time in. This much time is necessary, but at the same time, you need this day for recovery. You need these certain resources or vitamins or, just different stretches, different things of that nature that will just allow you to continue to compete at a longer, range and also at a higher level. Working out is one piece of it, but nutrition, sleep, and all of those things, they all play, a bigger picture. It's a big balance at the end of the day. So, me just seeing it firsthand and being in it firsthand, I'm able to give them firsthand experience and just knowledge that I was able to learn along the way. They don't have to go through it and burn out and figure it out at the end like, I should have did this. Like, no, let's start now. Let's prepare your mind, your body, and everything now. So that way, longevity is the piece. My coach always said the more you can do, the longer you can do is, what's going to make you valuable. So that's all the piece that I'm trying to give to them right now.
And that's such an important piece. And that's such an important connection, because connection is what keeps both performance and mental health sustainable for young athletes and even for pro athletes. Now, let's talk about hydration, sports drinks, and really coconut water, just as this is a passionate topic of mine. And then we'll come back to some more questions. But hydration is key, because this is an area where a lot of athletes and families have been misinformed. Now, whether people listening or viewing have their own opinions about this, the science is clear. Most traditional sports drinks rely heavily on added sugars, on artificial dyes, and chemical stabilizers, which can actually spike blood sugar and actually work against sustained hydration and mental clarity. And we have research backing this up, that even mild dehydration or sugar crashes impair focus, mood, and emotional regulation. So when we talk about coconut water, particularly clean options like Once Upon a Coconut that naturally contain electrolytes like potassium and magnesium without artificial colors or unnecessary additives, that supports dehydration and hydration in a way that aligns with how the body actually functions, for me is one of the most incredible offerings you can give to somebody who's looking to rehydrate. So how do you think about hydration today? And why does choosing natural hydration like coconut water versus Gatorade matter for both physical performance and mental clarity?
For me, like, I've always been a guy that's had my own natural energy, so I never kind of ran to the energy drinks or things of that nature to help me. But when you're in these peak performance places, football is a sport where you're exhausting yourself all the time trying to practice or train or play in a game. You need things that's going to hydrate you far more than just regular water. As I've did my own research, nothing like crazy deep, but like you really study water, like the actual water that we drink or get from the stores, it doesn't really do too much for the body. It doesn't really, replenish us or hydrate us as much as we may think. Um, and another thing is, going on a journey, like you come across all of these different coconut brands and different water brands that promote kind of the same thing. But at the end of the day, everyone isn't doing the same work to make sure that you, like you said, you're getting the proper nutrients and things of that nature to really nourish the body. And I've had, since being in Tampa, I've had a lot of coconuts, just raw coconuts, just getting that juice. And I was introduced to Once Upon a Coconut last year, actually. And I had one of the drinks, and instantly, like, you could just taste the pureness in it. You could taste, like, it's very clean. It's very refreshing. You don't get jitters from it. It's nothing that makes the body crash or anything. And it tastes very natural. Like, when I had it, it wasn't syrupy, right? And mind you, guys listening, I'm saying all these things and it may sound like an ad, but I'm just talking from, personal experience. I'm a big fan of Once Upon a Coconut in particular, actually. The blueberry flavor is actually my favorite. But right.
I got it.
But it's one of those things that you could tell that whoever built it out, like whoever had the idea from the beginning, they, took their time, they did their research.
That's an important reset, right? Because hydration isn't about intensity. It's about clean, consistent nourishment, like you said, just like mental health is. Things that are clean and consistent, those really resonate. Now, let's talk about a viral, relatable moment. Everyone has had one of those, right? Where if you shared this with the world, people would be like, what? Not him. So one of the hardest moments for high performers isn't failure. It's the resilience after success when no one is telling you who you are anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So what was that quiet, real moment when you realized you couldn't keep operating the same way for whatever it was? And what did that moment teach you about yourself?
I think for me, I kind of just had to like really look at or take a step back and look at my journey in a sense and just look at my life as a whole. I've always been somebody that's, provided or serviced other people. And, that was something that I always got fulfillment out of. That's why I think, the training was an easy, natural piece for me. And even with the training, like I don't do anything special, I'll say, or anything to retain parents or kids, other than just being myself and just being the natural person trying to teach and, give back like I was able to learn from the vets. But, you realize like, or not you realize, but I just had to realize like, it's a reason why parents, love my training sessions, or kids always want to come back and, train again. And you just gotta, see it for what it is. Like, I have all these passions and I want to do so many things, but I'm like, all right, I gotta, focus on one thing, and not necessarily one thing, but just focus on one area, and really double down on that. And I think for me, it was just focusing on that training aspect or that connecting piece. One thing that I'm actually building right now, that I haven't really came out publicized was just with 1,000 Hours Connected, building my own agency out where I'm really, allowing these kids from high school or college, just connecting them with my connections that I made throughout the time when I played with, and just being an advocate for them in different ways. So, it was just that piece of not necessarily being selfish. I don't think I was ever selfish, but just understanding like, I came from a big family. I have a big heart. I've always treated people with respect and gratitude for a reason, and just using that same energy and pushing it towards something that can grow and that can develop and become its own little house. So really focusing on putting my energy in those baskets and, put my eggs in those baskets and trying to just basically grow, develop, and flourish some of these younger kids out here.
Now, the bigger picture, right? You just kind of talked about this next chapter in your life, but sustainable success really comes from nourishment, right? So physically, mentally, and emotionally, when you're nourishing yourself, when you're refilling your own cup. You talked about servicing others and being everybody else's backbone and provider, but refilling your own cup is very important. And that's the most important part. So in this chapter of your life, 2026, what does staying fully hydrated mean to you in your body, your mind, and your purpose?
I think it means, just doing everything I need to do to make sure I can be the person I need to be to continue to push others forward. Like I was talking about previously, making sure I'm doing the proper research, or making sure I'm nourishing my body with the proper coconut water or food, or getting the right amount of sleep, or, just taking the proper steps. So that way, when I am in this light, or when I am in front of these kids and their parents are trusting me, trusting my vision, that I'm not steering them in the right direction. Absolutely. That's all it is at the end of the day. I think it's just making sure you're who you want to be and who you say you are. So that way you can push them in the right direction and guide them in the right way.
We are at the end of our date, my dear friend. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
That was the Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut, because real hydration supports real performance way long after the game ends. To learn more, you can follow Rashard directly on the gram at sweetfeet6_, and you can also find him on the gram at A000 hours. That's A00 hours. That's 1,000 hours connected. But again, I'm spelling it out for those listeners nationwide at A000 hours. Until next time, keep your body, your mind, and your heart fully hydrated. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. This was the Hydration with Heart segment, brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut.
Discover the refreshing taste of 100% pure coconut water that actually tastes great. Naturally sweet with no artificial flavors or added sugar. It's packed with electrolytes to keep you hydrated throughout your day. And with 10% of profits going to charity, every sip makes a difference. Pure taste, pure goodness. Experience nature's Gatorade. Visit Once Upon a Coconut or naturesgatorade.com.